Welcome everyone who might be watching this later. My name is Margaret Quaassdorff, and I am a dairy management specialist with Cornell Cooperative Extension on the Northwest New York Dairy Livestock and Field Crops team. And I'm joined today by my colleague Katelyn Walley, who is a farm business management specialist on the Cornell Cooperative Extension Southwest New York regional team. And today we are talking about value-added dairy processing in one of our discussion groups. And these discussion groups have been part of a grant that Katelyn and I received to help dairy farmers in Western New York become more familiar with the value-added dairy processing process and kind of learning about different aspects of the business and risk management surrounding that. This is one of the discussion groups to help farmers get more connected to different resources and hear a little bit different insights from parts of the industry that could be helpful when they're developing their plans or moving through this process. So joining us today, we have Jess May, and Jess is a business consultant with Farm Credit East, and Jess is going to share some insight from her own value-added dairy processing journey, as well as some of the work and offerings she has with Farm Credit East. So with that, Jess, if you want to tell us a little bit about your background, we can start there.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. As Margaret mentioned, my name is Jess May. I am a business consultant for Farm Credit East. With that, my primary territory currently is kind of the 86 corridor up through 390. I do a lot in like Allegheny, Wyoming, Steuben counties up through, I think Avon is still in Wyoming County. I apologize to anybody that lives in Avon. I don't know your county. So I primarily kind of work in those counties and a little bit around the Finger Lakes. My journey with Farm Credit started right out of Cornell. I joined the Farm Credit system. I was a loan officer for 11 years. I kind of worked in two spots for that last year. And I learned a lot there. I learned about sound lending, a lot about business. I kind of always knew I wanted to be a consultant and help take people to the next level. And that opportunity arose, so I took it. In the meantime, though, I grew up on a small farm, and I always said that I wanted to make my own ice cream. And while I was at college, I worked at the Cornell dairy plant, actually worked on the plant floor with the gentleman. I can say that confidently. I was the only woman. I would get up every morning at 3:30. I'd make it to the plant by 4. And by 9 a.m., I'd have a whole day's work in. But I learned a lot from them and really got a keen interest in that. Lo and behold, I did not plan this, but I married a farmer who had a value-added processing facility. And 2 weeks ago was their 20th year. My mother-in-law started the cheese business. My husband and I really took it over about 5 years ago. Consequently, I actually work part-time for Farm Credit East. And by part-time, I mean basically hourly. So I don't do a ton of work for Farm Credit, but I do get called into value-added type things. And I have a handful of DPAs, which is like profitability analysis and things like that I do. But my main role in life, aside from being a mom, is making cheese and fluid milk. So this has been, quite the journey. So I have a little bit of tidbits, I guess, from both a producer side as well as an industry professional side that we can talk about today.
Awesome.
And we are located in Odessa, which is in Schuyler County, which is just south of Watkins Glen. So just inside the Finger Lakes, but almost to your guys' neck of the wood of Western New York. I still call Western New York the land of milk and honey. So
I think so. I think that's a good description. So with your, I guess I don't know where to start here, but I heard a little bit in your story. You said with this value-added processing, picking up on your farm, you were working with Farm Credit. Can you talk about a little bit of the time commitment that somebody can expect as they're probably most likely dairy farmers What is
Okay.
the time
Yeah.
commitment to kind of switch over or
Yeah.
incorporate a value added type business? And I know they're all different, but
Um,
from your experience.
no, that's okay. In my experience, so I would tell you that I do what I do for the love of the cows. Like that's why I know that our farm, in my opinion, in 20 years, I don't know, I'm just picking a timeline. At some point, the milk truck, we are too small. We milk 45 cows. We are too small that my milk company says that I ship to DFA. It's no secret. My DFA says they're not going to drop me. It would be the milk company that would drop me first, like my milk hauler, because I would be producing too little for them to feel obligated to pick it up. Or not obligated is probably not the right word, but you know what I mean? Like it just wouldn't fit on their truck route. So that said, I knew that we needed to do something to remain viable. And I want to remain viable so that way I can have my brown Swiss and play with them. And so I do it for the love of the cows, but I will tell you, since I really took a super active role in the creamery, I'm not with the cows as much as I would love to be. The creamery takes my time. And I think that's something that a lot of people they don't realize, like they think we can just do this on the side. And if that's the case, you need to put your heart and your soul into it. And it's not the physical making of the cheese. It's not the physical milking of the cows, watching for heats, all that stuff. Like, yes, that takes time, but it's the marketing aspect. You Step number one, aside from like knowing what the PMO is you have to be a good marketer if you are going to do this value added thing. Like you have to figure out how you're going to market your product because you can have the best product in the world, but if you don't know how you're going to move it, it doesn't matter. And depending what you make, depending on shelf life, like that can be fatal, right? So like the PMO says that you get 17 days from the day that you pasteurize milk to sell it. Well, if you run your first batch and you're running 90 gallons, you got 17 days to sell that product. And honestly, I'd probably sell it in the first 10, or people aren't even going to have a week to drink it before they look at that date. And we all know that your milk might be good past that 17 days, but you know, the average consumer is probably going to look at that date and say, oh, it's not good tomorrow, so I'm not going to buy it because I'm not going to drink a half a gallon of milk tomorrow. So I spend a ton of time marketing. I am constantly, like my marketing plan, do a ton of social media. I take a ton of pictures. Buy yourself a flash drive for your phone. Like you can store a lot of pictures. Don't ever lose your phone in a baler or you lose like a year's worth of pictures. Made that mistake last year. I luckily do share on social media. So I have a few pictures of my daughter's first year of life, but it wasn't backed up in the cloud. Like it's just a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Like my husband, I don't think he really realizes like all the behind the scenes stuff we do. And the other thing too is like you can't be afraid to reach out for help if you need help. Like if you need help with I do all the bookkeeping, but like I hate doing quarterly payrolls. So I outsource it. Like you need to like pick and choose, but you're also gonna have to be gritty. And by gritty, I mean like you got to figure some of it out yourself. Canva is a great resource for making, like, if you're not fluent in Adobe Illustrator, I am fluent in Adobe Illustrator. But like Canva, like for the average person getting started, it's really easy to use, super user friendly. You can make a lot of your own marketing materials yourself. Like a marketing plan, survey your customers, make sure that like you got a product that they're willing to buy at a price point that they're willing to buy it, depending who your customers are, is super important. I do a lot of like thinking of my ideal avatar. I know that sounds like very millennial of me, but like who's my ideal people that I sell to? So like I kind of have a couple of different groups. So I have like the mom on vacation because we do have an agritourism part of our business. And I think about, okay, I'm a mom on vacation. I need somewhere I can take my kids to burn steam and ain't nobody going to judge me. Okay, great. Come to my farm. Like we got you covered. Like we're kid friendly. And then I have like the person that really cares like holistically about like what they're putting in their body and like why is my cheese superior to the other cheeses. It's single source. Like we kind of pull on those emotions a little bit. And I kind of tailor really a lot of our marketing to those two groups of people. And that's where I put my focus. And I'm constantly like when I'm drafting a post for social media, like probably my best posts like truly like just come from my heart, but to a degree that like I'm a mom speaking to another mom, or I'm someone that's like, it's just letting your emotions show. I think, people want to know who's behind the food in this
Hmm.
small movement, and you'll get a following. But I don't know. I could go on and on about
Yeah.
marketing. So
Yeah. No, that's great. Can you talk about more like the surveying your customer process? Like how do you know that you are actually reaching those crowds, and like how do you evaluate that as you go through?
so if you're new and starting, so I have already a significant following on social
Right.
media. So if I put something out, like they'll just take the survey. But a lot of times, what I'll tell new people is, do you have a friend that owns a business? Or why don't you survey, like, if your kids in soccer, like go down there and survey them soccer moms, like, hey, like what do I need? Like, for example, if you were selling bread, like, does it need to be sliced? Do they want sourdough? Do they not want sourdough? Do they like white or do they like wheat? Because maybe they like wheat, but their kid will eat white because it's the way they look, right? Like, we all know how kids are. Like, yes, they like consistency. Like, try to, like, and then take, for example, I'm working on a new chocolate milk. Like, I have 3 different samples of chocolate milk, and I sat them out, and I just labeled them 1, 2, 3. And literally, as people, like, just random people, I was like, hey, can you tell me what one of these flavors do you like the best? Like, just some market research like that. But also, like I said, you don't want to make 90 gallons of milk and nobody's going to buy it. So you need to kind of just make sure that, if you're making a yogurt, the type of yogurt, like, where do you want to buy it? Or what type of yogurt do you like? Like, some people like strained yogurt, some people like drinkable yogurt, some people don't like any yogurt. Like, how big can you go? And then, I think a big thing on a marketing plan is really, where are you going to sell it? Like, make sure that you got a home for it. Because even as a lender, they're going to want to see that, which we can get into in a little bit. But they're going to want to know that you have a place to sell this product, basically, to generate the income.
Do you find that it's easier or more beneficial for people starting out to start with like one product and say fluid milk or like a specific kind of cheese? Or do you think it's more beneficial to toss a variety out there or try for two and try and, after you've done a little bit of market research, not just throwing things out there, but is it?
I think when you build a facility, you need to build it bigger than you think you're ever going to need. That's been the nice thing about ours, is we started out with cheese, but it's huge. It's like, I can't tell you how big it is, but it's probably like 3 or 4 shipping containers all in one. Um, but there's lots of room there to add in more things. I am a strong believer that you can do one, maybe 2 things. Don't do a third, because you're never going to do it good, right? Like, perfect the first thing, then move on to the second thing, but always be thinking about the future at the same time. I mean, you can buy a vat that can pasteurize cheese and then, or pasteurize milk for cheese, and then all you got to buy is basically a press, but presses are expensive. So, you always have to think about scaling, and scaling your business is the hardest thing. But I consistently hear people thinking, and whether they do it or not is their choice. But I have people that they want to overinvest. And at the end of the day, I don't know what the statistic is, and I hate to say a number, but there are too many people that fail. And I think a lot of it is because they're over investing and they can't make those payments. So, I mean, you have to want it deep down inside, but I mean, you can go out and buy a whole pasteurized milk system, and it might not be the kit and caboodle for $20,000 and get yourself started. You got to have a building aside from that, but, like, for the equipment wise, you don't have to have the $100,000 seat Van Reed vat right off the bat. They're nice to have if you know that you can make it, but if you're just starting out and you don't know, I mean, and there are people that are constantly looking for that smaller stuff. Like, I mean, I'm sure plenty of people that are going to watch this webinar are looking for smaller stuff just to get started. So, like, I mean, and it's stainless, so it's pretty much, unless you get a crack in it, it's good forever. So,
Yeah. From You mentioned the lender needs, and from the lender's perspective on the marketing plan. Can you go into that a little bit more? What a lender looks at for someone starting, and then as they're maybe a year or two in,
Yep.
when they're looking at the lending plan again, how does that change?
So these aren't hard and fast rules that I'm going to tell you, but they are kind of best practices. So your lender's going to want a balance sheet. So that's everything you own and anything that you owe. They're going to want your last 3 years of income tax returns. They're going to want a projection. So you need to show what it's going to look like maybe on year one of sales and then how you're going to scale. And this can be part of a business plan, a formal business plan, or it can be not part of a formal business plan. And I'm like, business plans are good, but they're only as good as you keep them updated. So you can write a pretty basic one just to get your thoughts out, but you don't have to write a super comprehensive one. But I think it's always good to have one that you can start with because a lot of grants are going to require a business plan. So if you already got kind of the skeleton and then just kind of add it and tweak it every once in a while, I think that definitely helps. But I would do a year one projection, year two, and then a year three projection isn't bad, but it truly is. It's just a projection, right? We don't really know. Um, so you got those items. You need to have a good credit score. Anything above a 700 is considered a good credit score in Farm Credit East world. I don't know about other lending institutions, but historically that has been, the minimum that we'd like to see. The best businesses at the end of the day after they borrow, so whatever they're going to borrow, they have at least 50% post-close net worth. So after you borrow that money, your net worth stays at least 50% because then in essence, if you did have to liquidate everything, you're still going to walk away with something. Like you're not going to be bankrupt. Nobody wants that. And then we need to, as a lender, what we look for is repayment capacity. So, you know, don't go quit your day job and just start building a plan. Like I've seen that time and time again, and it doesn't work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time. You got to supplement the business as you get ramped up and then feel confident enough to maybe make that leap. And that's really hard. Like, I mean, I did it. It was terrifying, but then, by the time I felt comfortable enough, it was like, okay, we can make this work. Um, and really, like, those are kind of the things that the lender wants. I would ask to see a marketing plan. Just, it can be kind of basic, hey, like these guys have said that, these 5 businesses have said that I can do wholesale through them, or maybe we'll do it commission based, but they said that they'll give me, some shelf space, or I'm going to sell it on the farm and this is how I'm going to get the sales. I live on X road and there's, it's a main road between this big metropolitan area and this big metropolitan area. And, we're going to put a stand there or something, to draw people. But we do want to know how you're going to actually move the product if you want us to consider any income for the product to be counted towards repayment capacity.
That makes a lot of sense. So once you get going, then you said, it'll take a while to get it going. Is there like a balance, or how do you figure out like how to price the milk from your dairy versus, market
You need to
price?
know the figures on
What,
both sides. What's your cost of production?
yeah.
Every dairy farmer should know what the cost of production is on their facility, and it may shock you. Some people, it could be as high as $36, and some people, it's as low as $17, but you don't know what to price it if you don't know what your cost of production is. And that's for both the creamery side and the dairy side.
Mm-hmm.
So I will tell you my number. My creamery pays my farm $40 a hundredweight for milk. Because why should I bust my butt in the creamery if my cows aren't bringing me a premium, right? Or I can go down the road and buy it from the neighbor for $25 and make more money. Like that's kind of how I justify it in my head. Like one has to help the other a little bit. And then there are things you can do tax wise, like your facility can be rented from the farm that owns the land. And there's some other things you can do in there. But you do need to do like a cost of analysis of costs and then price it, but it can't be too high that your average consumer is not going to buy it, you know. Does that answer? Is
Yeah,
that in
no,
depth enough? Okay.
that definitely answers the question. And obviously there's a lot more to get into there. I see Katelyn might have a follow-up.
Sure. I just have a couple of other questions, particularly thinking about like the lender perspective. When you're working with farms that are interested in applying for grants or are kind of counting on grants to help cash flow a new project, what would be like advice that you would offer them or kind of pitfalls that you've seen or grant opportunities that are out there? Just kind of touching on
Yep. So
the
I actually
topic
write
of grants.
grants. I didn't say that, but I do write grants for Farm Credit East. Me and Heather Lapierre. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is figure out what entity you're going to put this in. Get that entity formed. You can do an LLC for a couple grand, and then get yourself a SAM number. It's on sam.gov, and that is the start to all grants. You get it once, and you're good to go. I think you might have to renew it, but don't quote me on that. But just double check. And if anybody asks you for any money to get the SAM number, that's a scam. You never have to pay any money to get a SAM number. So get that. And then the thing about grants, and I fall victim to this too in my business, is we want things fast, right? Grants are not fast. You can sit on your hands for a long time waiting for a grant to come out to get to the next move. So if this is something that you need to act on, you may have to borrow for it, and then use the grant for maybe another aspect of the business. Like for me, there was a grant that was going to come out, and I was going to use that for like our pasteurized fluid milk line. And I'm like, I need to make this move now. So we're just going to forego that grant for that, and I'll use it on something else. But right now, this is the priority. And for my business, I need to get this going. So there is the value added producer grant that is for supplies. You can't do buildings. And then sometimes, maybe you girls can help me. It's out of Vermont. There's grant. I can't think of the name of the institution.
Yeah, it's actually the grant that our value added project
Okay.
is funded
Okay.
through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we've got information included with all of the resources for this project on accessing those funds, and they're really great. So definitely.
Okay. And then intermittently, you might be able to like look at your Chamber of Commerce, or like the one we have is like really great. Or there's something called Scoped, which I believe is statewide. I'm not sure if it's county by county or if it's like regions. And then the IDA, those also are very helpful. They may have like some like small business grants, because in essence, you are a small business in the area. And then sometimes if you're adding jobs, you can get money that way too. I can't give you the specific names of grants. I didn't come prepared with that, but they are out there. And I know Farm Credit East does have a resource on their knowledge exchange site that lists, like, we try to update that once a year, a lot of grants.
As a lender, do you prefer to see farms take advantage of grants and incorporate that into their business plans and their projections? Or do you prefer that they figure out a way to cash flow it without the grants and the grants are sprinkles on top?
It can go either way. So like, great if it's sprinkled, right? But at the same time, a lot of grants, what they make you do is you have to fund the project up front. And then they only pay you when it's all done and it meets all their criteria. So that's called a bridge loan. So a lot of times you do need the bank still, or a bank lending institution, whatever, for that money in between. And when I was a lender, it was really hard for some people to wrap it around that. They're like, well, I'm getting the grant to pay this off. And I'm like, yeah, but if you screw up one thing and they don't give you the money, and I actually saw it happen once. Somebody, it was like $500,000 and they had to pay it back, and I had to show repayment capacity because things like that do happen. So we don't want that to happen. But we have to be prepared in the bank's interest, just in case.
Can you talk a little bit about financial indicators that you would encourage folks to think about or keep an eye on as they're planning for value added, but then once they're kind of moving toward some type of processing, what are things that you want people to pay attention to from a financial perspective?
Don't overbuy supplies. I know that you can buy a tractor trailer load of bottles really cheap, but make sure you got a good product that goes into it first. You know, your most expensive product is going to be the first one that comes off your line, right? And then it gets cheaper as you scale. But like really net worth, cash, I mean, or have access to an operating line. I'm one that like I really believe in cash flowing. Like cash is king at the end of the day. Like, but you also need to be able to do cash to accrual analysis. So if you prepay a lot, maybe you're cash flowing, but are you actually making money because you're just using basically an inventory that's sitting over here? I don't like nobody knows what their debt coverage ratio is in real life unless like you're a nerd like me. Like, so I don't really feel like that stuff is too bad. Something you can ask your lender though is like, what is your blended capital debt term? I do believe that that is important. The average business, we don't want to get that over 10 years. So what that means is if you had all of your loans and all of your debt and you paid the exact same amount, even after like say loan A was paid off, you still pay that same amount towards loan B. We want that to be a 10-year blend. That's like ideal. You don't really want it longer because then you're not really keeping up like with eventually you're gonna have to reinvest in your business. And if it's shorter, maybe you're strangling yourself a little bit cash flow wise. Some lenders though, like I always liked it around 7 if you're a growing and progressive business, just because that means that we free up cash quicker to like make the next investment. That's just my personal take on that. Yeah, those are kind of like the main things for me.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about too, particularly like maybe this one would be both for your personal business, but then also from the lender perspective, how does succession planning come into the conversation? Thinking about a lot of farms use this as a way to bring home the next generation, right? But then considering what happens later on, talk a little bit about succession planning in your own experience, but then also with the clients that you're working with when they're looking to diversify into value-added production.
Well, if you're going to bring someone home, whoever you sign up to do this, better be passionate about it. That's the first thing. Like, don't just use this as a band-aid. I've seen that happen before too. Sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here on this. I guess if you're trying to bring more income in, you still have to have a marketing plan. You still have to be able to move the product. Sorry, I don't really know how to answer this question. I mean, it's not an easy task, right? Like dad still has to want to sell the cows someday, and it's just you have to make sure we're not adding on another layer of complexity that we don't need to add on. And maybe it's, this is in the younger generation's name and this is their equity that they're contributing to the business. I do see that quite a bit, like, hey, we're going to pay for this, but okay, but both sides have to agree to it. And sometimes I see broken promises on that end. So I feel like that's a whole different conversation. Sorry,
No,
I just
we have farms that look at this as a way to bring home the next generation, and you get through that first 5 years of, and it doesn't have to be value added processing, it can be anything, right? And you get through the first 5 years of the new thing while it's still sparkly, and then it's like year 7 that the older generation's looking to retire or not be as involved, but they've built an entirely new enterprise off of having that many people involved, right? And that many people there to make decisions. And I didn't know, particularly thinking about lending, right? Like if you are working with a farm that has a very clear succession plan in place and does that provide stability from a lending perspective, right? Or does that come into play or part of the conversation when we're thinking about, is this the right use of our money or something?
we're always talking about it, but any lending institution you go is going to make everybody sign on the dotted line.
Yeah.
That's the long and short of it. And they're not going to let anybody off until they know it's a viable business without said other person. So, I mean, you need to be thinking about like, how are we going to buy out dad if you have an LLC? Is he going to gift all of his, I don't call them shares, but his capital account? Is he going to gift that out? Or is he going to take retiring partner draws? Like there's a lot of different tax complications too. So like, if you were starting a creamery and you made your own LLC, I probably wouldn't put dad in it as a partner, because then you're going to have to buy him out of that too, so like that just opens up a whole other can of worms. I wouldn't even call them worms, but just it adds a layer of complexity in it that I don't think that, and that may be the only way to get all the siblings home is to start a creamery, or something value added, whatever you're making. But I don't, sorry, I feel like I'm stumbling over my words here.
No, it's succession planning is a really tough one, because I think it's like, it's something that you should be thinking about anyway, right? And then when you let's add something else to our plates as a solution, sometimes it's not a solution, right? Like it's just it's more work
More
and
work.
more headache
Yeah.
and more logistics. And
Yeah.
It's really interesting. And I think, from an extension perspective, we work with farms closely on thinking about succession plans and encouraging them to have those conversations up front. So as soon as we're thinking about changing the business and enterprises, I think it's just it's a big topic. And you're exactly right that it's a topic for a whole nother day, right? But I think it's good to
It's just so emotionally driven.
highlight. Yeah.
You just have to make sure that the older generation and the younger generation are cohesive in this, and that we can't be mad at the younger generation if they're stuck at their new enterprise because you want them helping you, but we built this baby together. So,
Right.
So.
Right. Definitely. Can you talk a little bit about like what goes wrong, right? So from a lending perspective, particularly, like, and not to use specifics, but just in general, where do you see the biggest pitfalls? What makes things fall apart? If people are struggling financially, kind of what, with the Monday night quarterback view, what happened that made
they don't know their cost of
situation
production?
Cost of production?
Yeah. They don't know if they're truly making a profit or not. They might be, okay, are you paying yourself or not? Like, I'm not saying you have to pay yourself, but like that comes up a lot. Unsupportive spouses. I hate to bring that emotion into it, but I see that time and time again of, well, now you're doing this all the time. And well, okay, this is a team effort, or those are like kind of the more emotional ones. If your repayment capacity, say you got a day job and somebody loses their job, we try to work with people with it, but, and then other people, they get doing it and they just find they don't want to do it. Like it's a commitment and people need to realize that they need to be committed. Over investing. I already mentioned that, but I do see that a lot. Big shiny new pickup trucks and whopper choppers. I don't know how else to put it, but those things add up, and I get you need them, but you have to work within your means, and maybe you don't get the fanciest, shiniest bottler, but you got a bottler that works, and it might take you a couple more hours to do it, but at the end of the day, we're not in debt over our heads for it too. And then knowing your regulations, making sure you're nice to your inspector. If you're not nice to your inspector, they will make your life miserable. They're humans too. So,
on the flip side, the folks that you've worked with that have had really good success, what are the themes or what's consistent that seems like people are working on that tends to make them
they truly enjoy it. It was an idea that wasn't, I hate to use the word Band-Aid, but they weren't trying to make a Band-Aid to fix a deeper problem. My most successful clients that have done value added are actually, they're very passionate about the product. If I had to default myself for something, it's because I'm passionate about my Swiss. Like, like I have become more passionate as I've gone full time and can actually devote my time. And then probably the most successful ones, honestly, like they have that time devotion and time management skills. Like, not saying you can't work another job and have the value added, but you're not going to do it all well. Something's always going to struggle. And you just have to know that until you can like kind of turn it a little bit. But I really think those people, they have a mindset where failure isn't an option. That the mindset that the most successful people have is pretty incredible to be around. And those are the people that I want to be around. I don't, they're not, woe is me. It's, we got a problem, we got to fix it, yeah. And really, honestly, the overinvestment piece like that sometimes just kills people. So they stayed within their means. But that said, when you start small, you got to scale your business, and then you have to figure out, how am I going to scale my business? And you got to be thinking 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And that, as an entrepreneur myself, is the hardest thing, especially in today's world.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. You kind of mentioned a lot about like time management, and somebody's got to be really passionate and be willing to put in the time to make it work. From your perspective and your experience, and it's okay too, because this is throwing an oddball at you, what role does mental health and capacity, like monitoring your own personal capacity to take on another enterprise, how are you finding farmers kind of supporting themselves and safeguarding their mental health, safeguarding their capacity, safeguarding their family, right? Working together with your family, thinking about those who do that really well. What do you see them
You
doing
have to
together?
set boundaries. The world doesn't end if somebody emails you at 9 o'clock at night and you don't get back to them until 8 o'clock the next morning. There are apps that you can get for your phone that will like limit your time on certain things. If social media is a problem, it will say, whoop, yep, no, or it'll mute your emails. I love the do not disturb button. I don't get to use it often, but sometimes I do. I think you have to build a great team around you. Whether that's industry professionals, like have somebody you can call up and just confide in. I have a group of like 4 people that like, when it's the fan, like those are my girls that I call, and I'm just like, you're all dairy farmers. Some make products, some don't. Like, just hear me vent. And and I think podcasts are always good because you can put your earbuds in, or put one earbud in and one out so you can still hear what's going on around you, and just listen to some different stuff, kind of tune out. Farming is stressful, man. Like, I listen to a lot of farming podcasts, but there are a couple that just make me laugh, and heck, true crime, man. That'll take you out of it. I think you're having a bad day. You could be the lady on the street, right? But yeah, I think it's okay to take a vacation too. That's really, really hard for me. Super hard. Like, we don't go more than 3 days, but we do go 3 days twice a year. Or if you need an afternoon, like, take an afternoon and just go, or take 10 minutes and go for a walk and blow off some steam. Or if I have a bad day in the creamery, I'll just call it a day and I go hang out with the cows, because that's where I go. But then I got to shower if I got to go back in the creamery, so I just call it a day and leave it easy. But yeah, it's just kind of figure out what your thing is, and make sure that you actually schedule time for it. Me personally, I'm a very blocked person, so like, and not everybody runs this way, but I learned this in college about myself, is that like, okay, from this time to this time, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. Or like in my creamery, I've noticed, like, I have one full-time girl but I have several part-time people. Mm-hmm. Every Sunday, I just make a calendar for the week, and I just write like the highlights of like, okay, this is what needs done this day, this day, this day, just so that way they have a mental picture too of, this is what my week's going to look like, so I can prepare myself. And if you notice like somebody on the farm is having a bad day, like, just go up to them and have a conversation. Like, don't skirt around it, Mm-hmm. So it's super important, in my opinion. And you will burn out. Like, I've gotten there, like, and it's no fun, and nobody wants to be around you. And prioritize sleep, please. Because when I was in my 20s, I could do a lot more than now that I'm in my 30s. But
that's excellent. Thank you. Thank you for talking about that too. I think that we're so quick to say, like, follow your passion and, do what you want to do. But then at the end of the day, we're also all human with 24 hours in a day. So I appreciate you.
It's okay to fail too. I think a lot of people are scared of failure. Like, you can fail and pivot, like, and come out on top, you
Yeah.
know? So what you thought you wanted to do might not be what you end up doing. But if you look back, it probably taught you a lesson or two. So
Right. Um, I have one other financial question, and it would be kind of along the same lines of like, don't be afraid to fail. Um, from your perspective, should farms consider an exit plan, and or what does that exit plan look like, right? So we're thinking about doing this enterprise. What's your backup plan if you get 2 years in and you decide that you hate it? And how do you think about that upfront and plan for a potential exit out of
so
value
your
add?
good lender should ask you that. What's your plan B and what's your plan C? We used to call them, I don't know what they call them anymore, but we used to call them doors out. So how do you get out of this if we got to get out of it? A lot of people used to tell me, and still do, it's liquidate equipment. You know, I'm not going to borrow more than what my cows and my equipment are worth. Um, the nice thing lately about stainless steel is like what you buy it for, you can resell it for more. It's crazy, right? Um, those, I don't want to name names, but the shipping container companies, people are always looking for those, you know. Um, a lot of this stuff is movable. That's the nice thing about a creamery. And then, you know, if I think that's usually how people get out of it. You know, they just
Yeah.
kind of sell it off,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
then pay off the lender. And honestly, if you're not passionate about, the lender's not going to want you to get any more debt. So they'll work with you to, and that's why we want to know that you can cash flow without maybe the income.
Yeah.
We'll work with you to kind of unravel it. Maybe we have to stretch out the term and make your payment smaller because you're going to go to this instead. Like there are ways that, you know, nobody wants to see anybody go bankrupt or anything.
Navigate it.
Sorry, I should have had a loan officer sitting next to me that can
No,
answer
that's
these.
okay. I think it's really good, and we're also positive, and we're gonna make this work, right? But there's confidence that comes with knowing how to get out, even if you never use that plan, right?
Be
Just knowing.
confident, but not cocky about it.
Yeah, exactly. Switching gears a little bit, I know that you mentioned, being working well with your milk inspector and recognizing that they're humans. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit in your experience about like tips or themes that you've noticed in terms of navigating facility licensing and requirements and working with ag and markets and working with your inspector, kind of like that paperwork side of it and the logistics side of it, like any
Yeah.
advice that you would give.
So I don't know if it's just me or not because I didn't build my outside of my facility, but I've changed things inside.
Right.
And so you read the PMO, and that's kind of really long and really boring. And if nobody's read the PMO, if you want to fall asleep really easily, read it. The best way to navigate it is to download it on your computer and use Control F and then search for the word that you want. So if you
Perfect.
haven't figured out that trick yet, go ahead and find that. And that said, like, yeah, you got to figure out who your inspector is for your region. In Western New York, I think on Monday, this won't be out. So, you know, we're about, they're having new people. Just, they're changing the lines just a little bit. So figure out who it is and then tell them what your idea is. They're going to tell you need to read the PMO. So you need to come to them with a little bit something more. So maybe go to a supplier that knows something and they can help you draw up some designs. Make sure before you dig any dirt that those designs are approved. And your lender is probably going to want to know that they're approved because I actually helped somebody build a creamery and they some type of wall they said was approved, and then like they got them up and then they had to rip the walls down and put up some different type of plastic wall because they didn't like the type that they had. So some are really picky, but others, like this pasteurized line, like my inspector's been really great about it. Like, you know, he's like, oh, you just need this and this. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
we can get it done. And then there's some forms like a 791 or something. I don't know what the form name is, but anytime you change anything in the creamery, you have to like just fill it out. It's pretty basic. It's not hard. And then you just draw a diagram of your creamery. And then they want you to make like SOPs. So like, you have like a basically it's like a recipe and you just have to show them that you know what you're doing. You know, heat the milk to 145, hold it for 30 minutes, and then you know you don't have to say everything. You don't have to say pull out the thermometer, but they want to know that you know fluid, milk that has ingredients and it has to be heated higher, that type of thing. Like they just want to make sure that you're being safe. And if you ever have a problem, like don't be afraid to call your inspector. Like that's what they're there for. And they're more than willing to help as long as you are nice to them. Don't be a jerk. But that's any of your service providers. I speak as a service provider. Don't be a jerk
Yeah,
to us, please.
exactly. I think that's the biggest piece of advice, right? Like it's everybody's human and kindness goes a really long way in every step of this process.
Yeah. Something else I learned yesterday too that probably should be on here. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes that I made, but there is something that you can get when you get insurance, and you want to make sure you have good insurance. It's called loss of income insurance.
Mhm.
So that you can have in your policy, and if you ever had a fire or a natural disaster, Western New York does get tornadoes every once in a while. I speak from experience. Um, and you lose your income for like it'll pay your income for a year as long as you can show like you had income before. It will help you in that time that it takes to rebuild. And it also, if you had to go to someone else's plant and use their plant to make cheese or something, then it will help pay the rental cost on that. So I didn't know I even had that until I met my insurance guy yesterday. So I was like, oh, I need to make sure that everybody knows about this.
Perfect. It sounds like a great thing to have on your insurance plan, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, I just had another question and I think I lost it, but I know you were talking about having like team and service providers and being nice to those service providers. So definitely farms are working with milk inspectors, working with their lenders. In your experience, what are some other service providers or kind of groups of people that you like as a lender or working with somebody to create a business plan that you want to see them develop a close relationship with?
Um, so like chemical companies, like you're gonna find like you're gonna use those. Your suppliers. Really like your loan officer, you could work with a consultant. I'm not gonna tell you have to hire one. Like it's kind of a luxury, right? Like we're expensive. But some people do. You need to build a network of other creameries because there's a lot of talk that goes on amongst creameries of like, hey, what are they saying to you about this? Like, okay, like bounce ideas, like community over competition. And I say that like wholeheartedly, like there's room for us all. But I think a lot of people get scared that so and so is going to take my market. No, I don't think so. That's my bias. So I think there needs to be like I think this group that you're doing is a good idea. Like fundamentally, I just think it's good to have open and honest conversations. And then yeah, I mean, you can work with somebody at the SBA or somebody that will help you with uh, business writing and things like that. If you're not tech savvy yourself, find somebody that's tech savvy. That's my other. But I don't know. Part of the Kramer world is a little bit lonely, like because we're stuck by ourselves. But um, it's a big community, and you'll find your space. Hopefully that helps. I mean, it's a little different. Like if you have a dairy too, like obviously like you need to work with your nutritionist because you need to feed your cows right to make more milk with more higher components to get more yield, and things like that. But just on the creamery side, your inspector, your lab inspector, if they're different people, sometimes they are. And then wherever you're sourcing your milk with, I think it's important. I know some people may not own the cows that they're going to end up getting the milk from. But when there's diet changes that go on, you need to know because your product is going to taste and be different because the milk is a little bit different. So that's important too.
Are there any other management considerations on the dairy side that somebody who is looking into processing their own milk should consider from your perspective?
I had to get cow manager just because there aren't enough of us to go around. It just is another set of eyes. Your days are going to be long if you do both. Know that. I think nutrition, quality milk makes quality a product. Like so 700,000 somatic cell count milk isn't going to make a good product. I don't care what you're making, pasteurized or not. It's not going to be a good product in my opinion. So that's just, kind of on the dairy side, you still got to do good and you still got to do everything right to make it good on the creamery.
What about balancing your milk supply throughout the season or throughout the year? Do you have any insight on that?
If you're a single source dairy.
Yeah.
Oh, well, figure out when your busy season is and when your slow season is, and figure out how many cows you need to freshen in if you're, micro-sized or however you are. And then if you have extra milk, figure out what you're going to do with it. We don't want to dump it down the drain because there's something else we can do with it. Whether, you sell it to somebody else or some people milk once a day if you feel like your cows can handle that, and then bump them to 2 a day. But I don't know. That's not for everybody. That's a farm by farm discussion.
Yeah.
I've seen that though on these micro creameries.
Yeah. I think that with some of the other dairies I've talked to, it definitely depends on the product they're making and their goals and their product demand throughout the year. If they know that they're making or they have a lot of demand for a butter that they make, they're really concerned about having enough cows in, the winter freshening in versus, somebody who may have their busy season at making ice cream. And I think that's
Well, the good thing about ice cream is it's a 1 year shelf life. So frankly, you can make that all year round. But yeah, I always, I don't know. We freshen year round. Some people are more seasonal, but you got to tailor. It's going to take you a little bit to figure out what you sell, how much you sell, and the best route for that.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I don't want to push anybody to be a cheesemaker, but that's the beauty of being a cheesemaker, right? The longer it sits on my shelf, the more I get to sell it for. So, but not everybody has that luxury.
Can you talk about navigating working with your existing co-op? So if you're currently milking cows and you're thinking about doing value-added dairy, and kind of to Margaret's point too about balancing out your milk supply, in your experience, how have those conversations gone with different clients, and what are
It all depends on your co-op. That's where you need to start first. Some are going to let you do it. Some are going to say no. Don't hide it. Don't be sneaky about it, because they will drop your whole farm, and then you're going to have a whole another set of problems. That's the long and the short of it. They're either going to let you do it or they're not going to let you do it. And maybe you can be creative and find a way to get around it somehow. I've seen different things, but I'm not going to tell you, co-op versus co-op or anything. No. But yeah, they're either going to let you do it or they're not going to let you do it. And you also have to view it from their perspective too, which I do understand. If you are taking it out, they are your balancer. And is that fair to them? I think it depends too, how much you're taking out, so in my opinion, but just in what I've seen. But that's kind of all I can really comment, is that they're either going to let you do it or they're not. So
yeah. And that's a conversation that you need to have before you go ahead and do all of this other work, probably.
Yes. That's literally the first thing I tell everybody. When they say they want to do it, I'm like, well, you can read the PMO, and you can call your co-op and see if they'll even let you do it. And I don't know, this is just a thought, but I don't know if they'll let you keep a separate herd and a separate bulk tank. I don't know. I don't know how that works. So there might be some creative ways to get around it, but.
Have you seen farms have success just running the creamery, right? Or their milk supply is only going to their own process, and from a lender perspective, how do you manage that risk, and what does that kind of story look like, right?
Yeah, a lot of them, they started with a cooperative, and then ultimately that's my goal, is to get away, right? Because I don't like hauling and stop charges. But it just takes time to grow. Some people do it overnight. Maybe I've seen a couple people that they got dropped by their co-op for whatever reason, whether there wasn't a truck or their co-op just downsized. And, they were like, okay, well, we sold some cows, but we still kept some, and now we have to grow back into our herd replacement. But it comes down to marketing. that's a lot of milk to move if you have, 40 cows and you want to do it. That's a lot of milk. Um, and maybe you feed them different too. Maybe your cows, instead of making 90 pounds, maybe they're going to make 60 pounds or, whatever, but it's still quite a bit of milk to move. The only other thing that, and this scares me a little bit, is to be grade A, right? You got to process within a certain amount of time. So it really is team no days off because you don't have anybody else to balance your milk. So you have to recognize that you're going to go hard. And then you're probably going to have to hire people if you don't already have people that you hired. And my advice would be to hold off on hiring people until you absolutely need them. Yes, it's a whole different stress ball game and cost of workers' comp and all that stuff. It all adds up. And it's things you don't necessarily see. And really, to get reliable help, I mean, minimum wage is $15 right now in New York, but to get reliable help, you're not getting anything for less than 17. And you got to train them in food safety and all that stuff too. Like it's to get a good creamery person, I mean, you're talking $30 an hour.
I have one more question, Margaret, if that's okay. And then I am wondering, switching gears again, thinking about like product production and product quality. What types of trainings, resources, like from your like personal business, like what are you doing to kind of stay up to date, or like continuing education, right?
Penn
Getting
State,
ready for
they have a really good program. Cornell has some resources. Penn State, I find, just to be maybe geared a little bit more towards smaller producers. I just try to do that. I read different magazines. I'll put a plug in. The New York State's trying to make a cheese council. We do exist. We're just trying to grow it, get it going. Like we talk to other people in the industry. Hey, what are you seeing? Talk to your inspector. Say, hey, what's coming up? What are you hearing? Like they're constantly having to go to meetings, or they're seeing cool stuff. Or I'll just say, hey, like, what are you seeing that I maybe could do that you saw somewhere? Not product wise, but like just how are they storing this, or how are they doing that, or for like this fluid line, like if you see anything that I'm doing and you think like maybe this can move here and be better and more efficient, tell me. I actually moved a lot of stuff around in my plant because we were just so inefficient on how people were moving. Like I was thinking about it, like streamlining a parlor with the plant, and it worked fabulously and like shaved like an hour off some things, like just the way like we stand different and how we have like a packing center now, things like that. So I forget what the original question is. That's embarrassing, but
no. That's that you answered it. Thinking about like resources for continuing education and
Yeah.
product development. Nope, so you hit them. Great. Those were the questions that I had.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate it. I really enjoyed having this discussion, and I'm sure that the people in our cohort are really going to appreciate watching the recording and are going to gain a lot of insight off of what you had to say today. All right. A little plug for the rest of our discussion groups right now. Coming up tomorrow, Friday, May 3rd, we are headed with our cohort who can be there to Eden Valley Creamery in South Dayton, New York, to do the creamery tour and co-packing discussion. And then on May 16th, we are also going to be visiting Straburn Farm Creamery in Rockstream, New York. So folks can look forward to that and just keep up looking at our website to see if we have any more of these different discussion groups or tours popping up. And again, like to thank our funders through the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center for us to be able to bring this type of programming to our farmers in Western New York. And thanks again, Jess.